Hi everyone, welcome back to another video in the Web Security Academy series. In today's video, we'll be covering lab number 1 in the CSRF module titled CSRF Vulnerability with No Defenses. If you do not have an account on the Web Security Academy, you can get one by visiting the URL portswigger.net/websecurity and clicking on the sign up button. I already have an account and I am logged in, so to access the exercise, I'm going to click on Academy, go down, select the learning path, go down to client-side topics because we're covering a client-side topic, select cross-site request forgery, and go down to the first lab titled CSRF Vulnerability with No Defenses. Alright, let's get started. This lab's email change functionality is vulnerable to CSRF. So our vulnerable parameter is the email change functionality. To solve the lab, craft some HTML that uses a CSRF attack to change the viewer's email address and upload it to your exploit server. So the goal over here is to exploit the CSRF vulnerability and change the email address of the victim user. You can log into your own account using the following credentials. So we've been given creds, so let's put them over here. And let's copy paste them. Alright, let's access the lab. So right click and open it in a new tab. And while that loads, we'll open up Burp Suite Professional. So for the first part of this exercise, we'll solve it using Burp Suite Professional. But if you don't have a professional version of Burp, don't worry, in the second part, we'll script it on our own. Okay, let's click Next and start Burp. And let's make that a little bit smaller. Put it over here. And the first thing we're going to do is log in with the credentials that we've been given. So we're going to click on My Account. And the password was Peter. Click Login. And here we go. This is the email change functionality that the exercise tells us is vulnerable to CSRF. So let's go back to Burp and set the Foxy proxy extension to send requests to Burp and try and change the email address. So test.test.ca and click Update Email. And that should have been intercepted in Burp, and it did. So I'm going to send this to repeater. Set intercept to be off. And you could see over here, the email was changed to test@test.ca. So let's go back to repeater and look at our request. Okay, so let's create an analysis section. So in order for a CSRF attack to be possible, we said you have to satisfy 3 conditions. And the 3 conditions were: 1, you have to have a relevant action. The second one was it had to be purely cookie-based session handling. And the third condition was that there was no unpredictable request parameters. So to first determine if this is vulnerable to CSRF, it has to satisfy these 3 conditions. So let's go through the first condition. Is this a relevant action? In this case, what's happening is you're changing the email address of the victim user, so the user that you're phishing. This is definitely relevant because if you can change the email address to one that you can control, then you could just reset the user's password and fully compromise the user's account. So this definitely checks off. So we're going to say email change functionality. And so it's satisfied. The second condition is cookie-based session handling. So we could see over here the way the applications handle sessions or track sessions amongst users is using this cookie over here that is called session, and this is the value of the cookie. So this checks off as well. So we'll say it's using a session cookie. And the last condition is there has to be no unpredictable request parameters. So since this is a vulnerability that requires you to phish a user with an already pre-made request that the user is going to execute on his or her side, you need to know all the parameters that are required for the request to go through. And in this case, there's only one parameter, which is the email address. And so there isn't any unpredictable request parameters. Now, if you had a random number that is added with every request, such as a CSRF token, this is no longer vulnerable because the attacker can't predict ahead of time what that random number is going to be for the request to pass. And if that random number is not there, the request is going to fail, and so it's no longer vulnerable to CSRF. So in this case, we're going to say it's satisfied. So this is definitely vulnerable to CSRF. Now, if we want to exploit this using Burp Suite Professional, there's a really easy feature that automatically generates the CSRF script for you. So you right-click, click on Engagement Tools, and then select Generate CSRF POC. So we're going to click that and look at this script. So the first thing you want to do is click on Options and select Include Auto Submit Script. Now what that's going to do, it's going to automatically submit the form instead of you clicking on the submit button. So if you click on regenerate, you'll see over here it added this line which automatically submits the form. Okay, so let's look at the HTML over here. And again, if you don't have Burp Suite Professional, don't worry about it. We'll solve this manually in the second part of the video. Okay, so you've got the HTML element, the body element, script element, and then the form element. This is where this is important because this post request is done using a form element. You could see over here, this is the URL of changing the email address, which is done over here. It's also a post request, so a post method is used, and that's already specified over here. Next, you have to give it all the input vectors in the request, which in this case is the email address of the user. And you can see it over here. It's test@test.ca. And then there is a submit button for you to submit the request. And again, we added the auto submit so that it's automatically submitted for us. Now, in order to test that this works, let's say test1@test.ca. And then we're going to copy HTML, go back to the server, and click on, so let's right click this and open it in a new tab, so the exploit server. Now the way CSRF works is that you've got a script, you host it on your own website, and then when the user clicks on your sites and visits the link, the script executes in the browser of the user. The user, of course, has to be logged in or this won't work. But if the user is logged in, it'll perform this action for us. Now, to complete the exercise, we can't host it on our own server. We'd have to do it through the exploit server that is provided for us. So we're just assuming over here that the exploit server is hosting the script for us. So in the body section, paste your script, go down, and hit deliver exploit to victim. Okay, and here we go. It says, congratulations, you solved the lab. If we go back to the exercise, it should have changed the email address to test1@test.ca. And it did not. So we might have did something wrong over here. So everything does look correct. So I'm gonna reload this again. Let's change this to test2. Again, copy HTML, go to the exploit server, put it in here. Let's store the exploit first. And then go down and deliver the exploit to the victim. Okay, let's reload this and see if it changed. and it didn't. So I'm going to try one more thing. So I'm just going to click on test in browser. What that does is it hosts it on Burp Suite, and so we don't have to go through the exploit server. I'm going to copy this. It should submit on its own, and here we go. It changed the email address. Now, this is working. I'm not sure why the exploit server that Burp is using doesn't allow it to change the email address. So there might be something wrong with the exploit server. We're going to try one more thing by clicking on View Exploit and see if that might change things. Now, of course, we already changed it to 2. So to test this, we're going to click on 3, copy HTML, go to the exploit server, go down, and click on View Exploit and see if it changes it to test 3. And it did. So maybe I was clicking the wrong thing. I had to say view the exploit instead of deliver exploit to victim. So what this is mimicking is you sending a link to the user that contains this script over here, the user clicking it while the user is logged into the application. And so this performs the request on behalf of the user and changes the email of the user. So this completes the first part of the video. What we're going to do next is script this exploit on our own and then host it on our own server and then mimic clicking the link that the attacker has sent us. And then you'll see that the victim sees a normal page that says hello world, while the attacker in the background had changed the email address of the user. So it's a little bit more realistic when we're doing it on our own versus when we're doing it using the CSRF POC generator, especially if it's the first time that you've encountered CSRF vulnerabilities. Okay, so let's start off with the second part, which is scripting it manually. So we're going to close this. We no longer need it. And we're going to work from Repeater. So again, if you don't have the professional version of Burp Suite, that's completely okay. Just use the Community Edition, intercept the request using the proxy, and then send it to Repeater. And to script the exploit, we're going to use an HTML document. In this case, it's called CSRF Lab 01.html, and I'll include the link to the script in the description. So the first thing we're going to do is add the HTML element because it is an HTML document. Next, we're going to add the body element and then add a heading to the document. So we're just going to say hello world. And then we're going to add a form element and then say the action is to visit this URL over here, is to perform this request over here. So we get that using the host element over here. Let's copy that. Add HTTPS. And then the path to the change email functionality, which we get from over here. Okay, the next thing we need to do is set the method. So this was done using a post method. Okay, and then we're going to add the ID to be equal to CSRF form, just in case we need to reference it later. Okay, that looks good. Next, we need to add the parameters in the form. And in this case, we only have one parameter, which is the email address. So we'll add that using the input element. And we'll say the type is equal to hidden so that it doesn't appear on the page, because we don't want to alert the user that something is happening in the background when the user visits our website. So it's hidden, and then we're going to say the name is equal to email, and we got that from over here because the name of the parameter is email. And then we're going to say the value is equal to, let's say, test5 at test.ca. All right, so what this does is it's submitting a form to this functionality over here. So to this path, my account /change email. it does a post request and submits this email over here, which is test5@test.ca. Now we also need to add the script element that performs the action when the user visits the page. So we're going to say document.getElement by ID, and we're referencing the CSRF form element, which is this one over here, and that's why the ID is CSRF form. And then we're going to say dot submit. And what this is going to do is when the page is loaded, it'll automatically in the background submit this form over here. So let's save that. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is put this in an iframe. And the reason we're putting it in an invisible iframe is because we don't want the user to see that we're changing his or her email address in the background when they visit our website. So we want this attack to be completely invisible to the user. And so what we're going to do is we're going to submit this in an iframe. So to do that, we're going to add the iframe element. We're going to say the style is equal to display none, because we don't want it to be visible at all. And we're going to say the name is equal to CSRF iframe. And that looks good. Now we need to say over here the target is the CSRF iframe. All right, so then this is done within the iframe and it's completely invisible to the user. So unlike when we were doing it with Burp Suite Pro, we actually saw it being submitted and then it redirected us to the response page when you change an email. In this scenario, we don't want it to alert the user and show the user that we're changing his or her email. And so we're going to submit it in an iframe so that it's invisible to the user. So this looks good. So again, I'm going to save it. Now the next thing we need to do is host it on our own web server. So to do that, I'm going to open up the command line. Let's make that a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to go to where this script is hosted. So I'm just going to copy the path. Let's click copy path, go to the command line, paste it. So I'm just moving directories over here, and then I'm gonna create a simple Python server. And I'll explain what that does in a second. All right, so what this did is it spun up a simple Python server on localhost, so 127.0.0.1, and on port 5555. So now my script is hosted on the server, and all I have to do is send this link to the user. So let's say HTTP 127.0.0.1 and let's say 555 and then the name of the script. So CSRF lab01.html. So what we're emulating over here is that we send an email to the victim and say, check out so-and-so, something that is appealing that the victim will click on. And then once the user clicks on this link, and we get a 404. So, and I know why, because I incorrectly named that. So it's lab01. All right, let's pretend that did not happen. All right, so when the victim clicks on this link, all the victim sees is hello world and doesn't know that something might have happened in the backend. So let's see if it actually worked. Hit send. And it timed out. So this didn't work because it timed out. We're going to have to open up a new instance of the lab. So go back, open new tab, and we're going to have to wait for it to load up. All right, it loaded. Now for this attack to be successful, the user has to be logged into the system. So we're going to need to re-log in. Password was Peter. Click login. And you see this is the email address of the user. Now let's perform our attack again and see if it works. But before we actually do that, the URL did change. So we're going to have to change that in our script. Let's paste that over here and make sure it's correct. So we've got 2 my accounts. All right, that looks good. So again, the script is still hosted on my simple web server, and we're going to click the link. All right, so the user clicks the link, and all the user sees is the hello world message. And in the background, what it should have done is it should have changed the user's email without the user knowing. So let's see if the email address was changed. Hit send, and here we go. So the email address of the user was changed to test5@test.ca without the user even knowing at all. So in a real world scenario, what would happen is this page has some kind of exciting information where the user is looking at the information, and in the background, the script is running and changing the email address and exploiting the CSRF vulnerability to change the email address of the user. And then the user is going to go back to the application, either close it or be on another page of the application and not even notice that the email address changed. In this case, that's the only page that is available in the application, and so it's obvious. But in a real world scenario, the user is likely going to just either close off the session or go to another page in the application and not notice that something happened in the background, which makes it really dangerous because as an attacker, once I change the email, I will automate the entire attack to automatically reset the password with the email that I control, which in this case is test5@test.ca, and compromise the user's account without the user knowing. Now, the only time the user is going to know is when the user logs out and tries to log in again, and their original password doesn't work because I've changed the password as the attacker. Okay. So I hope this explains how to exploit a simple CSRF vulnerability. In the upcoming labs, it'll increase by difficulty, so we'll see that there are some defenses, it's just that they're implemented incorrectly. All right, so to recap, we first exploited a CSRF vulnerability by using the professional version of Burp Suite, and then we manually did it on our own by scripting an HTML document that changed the email address of the user.